If you're the kind of gamer who wants a computer that just works, no endless tweaking, no surprise bottlenecks, and a price that feels like you actually got a deal, then you're probably already feeling a little uneasy scrolling through the endless sea of specs. Every listing seems to brag about 12 cores or ray tracing ready, but none of them answer the simple question: will this machine hold up to my evenings of Fortnite, my weekend raids in Destiny 2, and maybe a bit of video editing when the work week ends? That hesitation is real, and it's why I spent a few days digging into what the Skytech Nebula actually does in a typical apartment or dorm setup before hitting record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the core of any gaming PC, the processor and graphics card. The Nebula pairs an AMD Ryzen 55500 with an RTX 3050. On paper, the 5506 cores and 4.2 GHz booster solid for 1080p gaming, and the RTX 3050 6GB of GDDR6 can push most modern titles at medium-high settings. In practice, I ran a handful of the games I play most often: Warzone, Valorant, and The Witcher 3. Warzone stayed around 78 frames per second on high with the RTX 3050, while The Witcher 3 dipped to the low 40s only when I turned on everything, including hair fidelity. For a first-time buyer who isn't chasing 4K Ultra, those numbers feel comfortable. The system also comes with a 1TB NVMe SSD, so loading times are practically instant compared with an older SATA drive. That speed alone often feels like an upgrade you can't ignore when you're waiting for a new map or a raid lobby to fill. Now, the real hidden trade-off shows up once you plug the machine into a modest living space. The Nebula's case is a fairly standard mid-tower with a high-performance air cooler positioned on the front. It does a decent job at keeping the CPU temps below 70°C under load, but the GPU can push the case temperature up to the high 70s if you leave it running for a marathon session. In a small bedroom with limited airflow, that heat can make the surrounding room feel warm, something you'll notice if you're playing long into the night. The solution? Give the case a little breathing room, maybe a cheap fan that pulls air from the back, or just keep the PC on a raised surface. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a practical consideration if you're sensitive to heat. One of the biggest concerns for budget-oriented gamers is future-proofing. The Nebula's 650W gold-rated power supply is an often overlooked detail, but it actually provides a nice safety margin. You could upgrade the graphics card to a 3060 or even a 3070 a few years down the line without needing to swap the PSU. The fact that Skytech includes a 650W unit instead of a 500W one means the system is ready for modest upgrades, which is exactly where the value lives beyond the headline specs. Of course, the motherboard isn't user replaceable without some technical know-how, but most people who buy this pre-built aren't planning to replace the board themselves. Who should buy this machine? If you're a casual to mid-range gamer who plays most titles at 1080p, wants a Windows 11 installation that's ready out of the box, and doesn't want to spend the time building a rig, the Nebula lines up nicely. It also works well for students or professionals who need a decent amount of RAM for occasional video editing or Photoshop work. The 16GB of DDR4 at 3200 MHz is enough to keep multitasking smooth. The Wi-Fi 5 connectivity is adequate for most apartments, and you can still plug into a wired Ethernet cable if you need a rock-solid ping for competitive matches. Who should skip it? If you're chasing 4K gaming or plan to run the newest AAA releases at max ultra settings, the RTX 3050 will become a bottleneck sooner rather than later. The same applies to creators who need massive storage. While 1TB is generous for games, it's modest for a full media workflow, so you'll likely need an external drive or internal upgrade down the line. Also, if you're an enthusiast who enjoys tinkering with custom cooling loops or swapping out components with ease, the pre-built chassis and proprietary cable routing can feel restrictive. Let's drill into a practical everyday scenario. Imagine you've just moved into a shared apartment and you only have a small desk with a 24-inch monitor. You plug the Nebula in, hook up the HDMI cable, and the Windows 11 desktop loads within seconds thanks to the SSD. You fire up Cyberpunk 2077, set graphics to medium, and the game runs at a stable 60 frames per second. You notice the fans spin up a bit louder when you're in a crowded city scene, but the overall noise level stays below 35 dB, which is comparable to a quiet conversation, nothing that would distract a roommate. When you switch over to a study session in VS Code, the system instantly flips to a low power state, and the fans almost disappear. That kind of seamless transition is what most pre-built users appreciate. You don't have.